hustling, by doing the only thing I knew how to do, doors opened for me that I couldn't have otherwise imagined.
While other people are focused on impressing each other, people like me are winning on LinkedIn. Why? Because it's all about connecting.
I couldn't breathe if I wasn't an entrepreneur.
Welcome to the Startup Gambit, presented by Haste and Hustle. I'm Shauna Arnott, founder and CEO of Haste and Hustle, and I'm joined by
Devon Codrington, COO of Haste and Hustle. And today we are so excited to be joined by Britt Dixon, social media extraordinaire. You know what? We really want to get into this. Have a lot of great things to talk about, but let's take a second and hear a word from our sponsor.
What if I'm not ready?
What if I don't have all the answers?
What if I just keep going?
What if it doesn't go as expected?
What if this setback helps me see the bigger picture?
What if I realize how far I've come?
What if I remember I'm doing the best I can with what I've got?
Today, I'm ready for what if.
Get ready for what if. Meridian, where banking feels good.
Okay, we are back. Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing?
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here with you.
We're so excited to have you. This is great. So I want to start. I love to give every one of our guests the opportunity to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their entrepreneurial journey. So feel free to take a few minutes to just share with our audience who you are, how you got to where you are currently, and some of the inspiration in your life that has sort of led you there. So welcome,
amazing.
Britt.
Thank you. Okay, so I am Britt Dixon of Britt Dixon Media. I run a social media content creation, digital marketing business. So I would categorize myself as a content creator and a storyteller. I help small to medium-sized businesses build their brands online through social media, share their stories on social media, tell their stories through video content, and really build their online communities and sell their products and services in our digital world. So I started my business last January. It was 2 months before the pandemic hit. And I sort of took that leap. I thought about it for a really long time. And then I took that leap and started my business. And the first 2 months were amazing. I was loving the work from home finally, and the excitement of being my own boss. And then all of a sudden, the whole world changed, and a lot of the events and a lot of the clients that I had work scheduled for, that sort of all disappeared. And I thought, oh my goodness, I just left a great job with, all these great benefits and pension and everything to start my own business, and everything is changing. But I think in that true entrepreneurial spirit, I was like, nope, I am never one to give up or even to think I've made a mistake. I'm going to just plow right ahead and see what I can make of this. And a lot of my clients are within the wine industry, and a lot of them didn't do a lot of selling online prior to pandemic. I don't know why. We buy everything else online, but for some reason, wineries weren't selling a lot of wine online. People, like to go sort of pick it up, try it, go to the LCBO, things like that. So it was new. It was new territory for them to try to reach their customers online. And it took a couple of months for a lot of those clients to come up with a new business plan, to pivot, the word of 2020, pivot, to figure out how to do that. And then it was things totally got rolling, and it was amazing. It was amazing to see how things changed and how busy my business became, working with wine clients and other small to medium-sized businesses, really sharing stories and finding new ways to market themselves digitally. So that was really exciting. And I, like I said, work with a lot of clients within the wine industry. That passion for me started when I was super young. I grew up in a rural area in the Niagara region, which is amazing for wineries and grape growing. And I used to pick grapes and make wine with my papa when I was 3 and 4 years old. And for me, I just loved learning about wine. But I didn't really think that was going to be a career choice for me. I was always someone who really loved telling stories and asking questions. And from a really, probably in high school, when you're thinking about what you want to do with your life, I was I'm going to be a journalist. I really want to be a journalist. I want to tell stories. I thought that I was going to be a print journalist. So I went to school for I went to university first and did sort of like an English language and lit with a minor in communications as I was trying to figure out the path I wanted to take. And then I went to journalism school. And as soon as I got there, I realized that like, yeah, journalism is exactly what I want to be doing, but I want to be on the broadcast side of it. I want to be in front of the camera. I want to be telling stories. I want to be interacting with people. And I want that like crazy fast deadline of the world of journalism. So, I busted my butt, interned a year earlier than I was supposed to, and just really wanted to like get going and make things happen. So I worked as a broadcast journalist for a local television station for 15 plus years. I started from the bottom, rolling teleprompter and as a production assistant, timing the newscasts, all with that dream that I wanted to be an on-air reporter. I wanted to tell stories that mattered to my community. And so I did that and I loved it. It was an amazing job. It didn't feel like work to me. It felt like every day was super exciting. And I loved that every day was different. And then with the sort of changing landscape of media, especially television journalism and the emergence of digital and online and social media, I could sort of see like the writing on the wall. This is not going to be that long-term career option for me. Like things are really changing within the TV landscape. So what can I do to take this love of storytelling and, video and like, really like creating these stories with all of those like visual elements, and what can I do to do that, but make it a career? And so, or the next step in my career. And so I decided at that point, there was a job that came up at the university that I went to, Brock University in Niagara, for a communications officer for the Wine Research Institute. And I thought, okay, this is perfect. I'm going to get to tell those stories. I'm going to get to build their social media, and I'm going to get to like learn more about wine, which is my other passion and something that I've loved learning about, from when I was little. So luckily for me, I already knew a lot of people within that industry because I used to go to wineries and wine events, and people knew who I was from being on television. So I got this like really unique experience connecting with winemakers and like really learning that passion building that passion even more. So when I decided to sort of take the leave broadcast journalism, go into this role at the university as a communications officer, in my mind, I was like, this is a perfect next step for me, but this isn't it. Like, this isn't the sort of end game. I always sort of knew I was going to do something more. So I did that for about a year and a bit. And I learned as much as I could. I did a lot of wine courses, made all those connections in the wine industry there, and built up their social media and sort of figured out how to use all those journalism skills to tell stories that way. And in doing so, I realized there was such a need for these wineries and this like total economic driver that's in this area, like to really be built up. So I thought, I can totally do this. I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to do exactly what I'm doing here in like a small portion of my job, but I'm going to do that for my career, and I'm going to help these people and help these businesses. And that was such a huge passion. So took that leap, and despite the little bump of the pandemic started, never looked back, and it's been amazing. And so a lot of my clients are people that I've sort of worked with for years in one way or another. I work with wineries now that I used to sort of show up around harvest time every year when I was a TV reporter and interview them, and now they're my clients, which is so much fun. And yeah, I still get that sort of storytelling, that authentic storytelling, even when we're creating video content. It's all about like, I like to go in and interview them, ask them questions, like I was a journalist still, because I want that natural passion to come through from these business owners. And yeah, I feel like every day I sort of like pinch myself a little bit to think like I've been able to take these two like passions that I've had and create a business out of it. So that's my story.
That's amazing. Thanks so much, Britt. So amazing. It sounds like you have like, I mean, I don't know if you felt like this when it was happening, but it sounds like you've been able to strategically think about what you want to do, recognize what's working, and recognize the path you're supposed to take. And then when things shift around you, you're able to stop, look, realign yourself, and then like shoot with like laser beam focus to where you want to go. And then like, boom, you've parlayed that into doing all these things that you love. Amazing. Great story. Like that's just, it's like you put it together perfectly. I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. It's like your overnight success was like, 15 years in the making or 20 years in the making, right?
That's good.
That's awesome.
Always good to include that. Do you feel like, so Britt, like, it's funny because I think that you've done this like in such a great way that you've been able to build and work with the people that you wanted to work with as you know, for Britt Dixon before you even got there? Do you understand where there was like one night or one pivotal moment where you were like, I'm doing it? Like, do you know if there was just one change that made it like crystal clear for you?
I don't think there was. I think it was sort of like a slow thing that, like, I was always the type of person in my career, my business life, that I was never satisfied with like where I was. I was always like, what's next? What's the next step? And one of my really good friends reminded me on, like, I met her on my first mat leave. I have 2 young kids, and it was my first mat leave when I was still a reporter. And she was like, I remember first meeting you, and you told me that one day you were going to own your own business, and like, here you are with your own business. And I like kind of forgot about that conversation, but I think it was one of those things where like, it was always something that I thought I was going to be doing. And it must have been like sort of that like introductory meeting with someone where I'm like, this is what I do now. One day I'm probably going to own my own business. Cause like, that's just my mindset. And like, sort of like on it went. I never had that sort of plan in place, but it kind of, all of a sudden, I think like it just like, I think it developed over time. And then it was like, yep, I think this is the right move at this time. And
it just made sense.
I'm the kind of person, like, once I sort of get that thought, I'm like, okay, we're going to do it. So a month later, I'm going to start my own business.
You still put the months though. So that's pretty good. Like, you're like still moving fast.
Have there been, you know, as a new entrepreneur, because I mean, really, it's only been a year since you made that initial foray into it, or a little over a year, and you've done so well. Have there been any things that have surprised you along the way about, you know, the challenges of growing your business, or some of the eases of doing things? Like, what are the surprises that you've had?
I think like definitely the surprises would be like how much is involved in running your business. Like, you can totally be an expert in the niche that your business is in. Like, I was like, I am an expert in storytelling and, you know, video storytelling. So this is what I'm going to do. But like, that's just one of the many hats, right? Like, as a business owner, and for me, it's just me. So I'm the CEO and the accountant when I'm doing my billings, and like a lawyer when I'm doing contracts, and the admin, and there's so many other hats that you wear. Mm-hmm. And I think like a lot of those things are new, right? I've never done an invoice before. I've never written a contract before. I've never renewed. So big surprise, not just like going out and doing this. It's all of the little parts of it, and like the working within your business. I think like part of all like that network of entrepreneurs that I've had who came before me, who were able to give me advice, send me an invoice template to work from, or contract template, and just to really connect with those people who could give advice and those little things that you're not an expert in. And, Shauna, Devon, you both have been like so instrumental in that process, and just having a network of like-minded people to bounce ideas off of and ask advice from. And that's huge.
I think that's so important. And that's one of the things that we really strive for at Haste and Hustle, is to educate people on all the processes and systems and the running of a business, as opposed to making your product or selling your service. There is a huge difference between, making a widget than, and looking at your accounting and all your legal matters and all the different things. And then when you start to grow, your hiring practices and your, all those things. So and that becomes the real hang up for a lot of entrepreneurs, because as you say, it's not like things that you necessarily have learned. You may, have learned how to, write a really great press release and develop social media, but, to write a service agreement or an NDA or any of those things, those are all really new things. And those are the simple things. Mm-hmm. Once you start forming partnerships and raising capital and getting into some of the deeper level things for bigger, like tech companies and different things, that's when it becomes so much harder. And that's where we're, that's something that we're really trying to support that. So it's great that you brought that up, because I think it's very important. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's what, if someone is starting their business and one piece of advice, it's like, have a strong network, like whenever you're networking with other business owners, like have that mental list of like, okay, this person just said they did that. I bet down the line, like they might be able to help in that aspect of my business. So I'm going to like, file that name away and like, create that roster of people who you can call on for things that you aren't an expert in.
Yeah,
exactly.
The network has that great ability to give you information on what you don't know that you need. It's just, you're going to Google things and look for information and try to be ahead of things as much as possible. But sometimes just the experience of someone else having done it and making that mistake and tripping, despite the information being out there, the network does a great job of just serving that up. And if you listen and if you have good people around you, enough people, then it really, really helps. Amazing.
Yeah.
What do you feel like? Okay, so 2020 was a bit of a crazy year, but what do you feel is something that's necessary for, I guess, all businesses to like grow and scale? I mean, from a social media standpoint, I guess.
I think like from a social media standpoint, when you're looking to promote your business on social media, like you need to know who your niche market is, who your ideal client is, who you want to be sort of like speaking to and reaching. And then, then once you figure out who you're going to like sell your products or service to, who it appeals to, then you can sort of figure out how to market to them, how to reach them, right? And also knowing that, and I think it's true for, every aspect of your business, like know your ideal client, who you want to work with, who you want to market to. Like once you can really sort of have that vision and narrow down like who your business speaks to, then you can get off rolling on that. Because I think a lot of people think about it, even in terms of their service offerings, like they offer too much, right? Like niche down.
Yeah.
I really believe in niching down. And that was like a little objective that I did for myself when I was writing my service offerings on my website or trying to figure out who I wanted to work with. It was like, okay, what are like the 2 or 3 things that I'm like really going to specialize in so that I can like make a big difference? Like, yes, I've written, media releases and I've done some PR and things like, but I don't love those things, right? Like I love creating content and creating video content and helping people tell stories. So I'm going to like figure out what exactly I can do to serve people. And then you're just going to do that like better than anything that you like sort of like doing, like when you really love something. And even figuring out who your ideal client is huge, because then it gives you a sense of how you can market, how you can reach those people. For me, it's like, yes, wine clients, but also small to medium-sized businesses who are sort of within that same industry. And when you have an idea of who your ideal client is, who your niche market is, then when someone sort of comes in and they don't fit in that, you can tell pretty quickly. And I think that helps. That's helped me become more successful as a business owner, just knowing who I work the best with, who I can sort of form those great relationships with. And then a lot of the time, that's the word of mouth marketing that comes from that, because I really narrowed down, who my niche is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that a lot of business owners or people that you talk to do struggle with that? I know I struggle with that just because I'm like, jack of all trades. I'm just so excited about whatever's new and coming forward. I'm like, this sounds great. I want to be a part of this because, you want to help people. We talk to a lot of people and they're doing something and you're like, that's so cool. And, like Shauna does a great job of knowing that she's the connector and says like, I'm going to put you in touch with this person. And then me, I'm like, that's go work with this person, but also call me because I want to do it too. And it's like, you just can't. It's just not possible. So, for a long time, people would ask questions like, well, what kind of photography do you do? And I'm like, but you really do have to kind of narrow in. Do you find that that's something that you have to work on, or most of your clients are aware that they need to focus in? Like, does that work for you?
I think a lot of the times that's something that you need to like narrow in on. Like, I think a lot of people have that same mindset where they're like, okay, I want to be like sort of doing a little bit of everything. Or especially like, I know when I first started, like, last year, and someone was like, oh, can you write a media release for me? Can you do that? And it was things that I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that because, it pays the bills. But then you get to a point where that's not exactly what I want to be doing for my business or what the service offerings are. So it's really helped me too. I actually worked with a business coach who was like, write down your ideal client. Like, where do they shop? What do they do? Like, what are their sort of values? And I thought it was like really silly at the beginning when she was like, do this exercise. I'm like, I don't have time for this. And then it's really, really helpful when you have that clear vision in your head of like what you're going to offer as a business. It's the same. you can sort of apply those same principles for a social media strategy. So a lot of the times when I work with clients, I say, like, don't try to be an expert in everything. Like, what exactly are you doing for your business? What value can you provide for your audience or your customers? What pain points can you sort of help them with? What problems can you solve? And then pull out those, few couple of things and then build your strategy around that, because that helps you stay focused. If you just sort of throw it all out there, it can be overwhelming. And then, it's like that whole mentality of you're trying to speak to a crowd of people where, like, picture yourself on a concert stage trying to, like, shout to a whole crowd of people. Whereas, like, if you really narrow it down and you're focusing on speaking to one specific person, chances are they're going to hear you more. You're going to form that connection. And then you're going to be able to, that brand loyalty, that selling, like, that's going to get you farther with your business goals and sales and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you're the right fit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. I have a little bit of a abstract question for you.
Okay.
Good. We love this. I love this. Yeah.
So, you grew up in Niagara, and you've always kind of had that interest in the wine industry, and you took all the education that sort of supported what you learned, and you built up a network. You worked for the local TV station, and, held jobs in our community, and and then have leveraged those relationships and your previous networking into, a great business, and people know who you are, and you've really managed to, you built your community and your reputation almost before you started your business. And then it just kind of amplified from there. And so I guess my first question is that something you think is important for business owners to be doing ahead of their business, or is it something that they can wait on? And then the second question is, if you were to, remove yourself from the Niagara region and transplant yourself to, I don't know, Calgary or some other location, San Antonio, I don't know. How would you then go about building up a community and a network, and how can you recommend that to?
I think for the first part, a lot of people, I think that's why we see so many, like, side hustles, right? A lot of people are sort of focused on, before they launch their businesses, developing what they want to do. And, you put in that passion into your side hustle before you take that big leap. For me, I was doing a lot on the side slowly. Like, I definitely had a side hustle going before I took the leap to start my own business. And I think that also helps with the leap, right? Because you feel like you get some things going. And I think, like, it was really important for me to create that community, build that community, because so much of what I do, I want people to know me, the know, like, and trust. I want people to know me. I want people to like me, and I want people to trust me. And I feel like, from being a television journalist to then working at the university and then starting my business within that same industry, people knew who I was. People knew I was invested in that community, and they knew I cared about it. So I think, like, I've even had clients tell me, like, I'm choosing to work with you because you're from this area. You care. Like, I know your connections. I know your passion, rather than hiring, like, a boutique social media marketing firm from, Toronto or somewhere outside of the city. Right. So for me, that really had huge benefits for my business because I had created those relationships. And then, it's that whole, you're more likely to take a recommendation from a family or a friend than, like, some random, advertisement that you hear. So for me, there was a lot of that, like, family, friend, like, word of mouth, because it was like I was part of the community. And especially for something like the wine industry or, that sort of community that I work with to create content in, it's super tight knit. And those people, they support each other, and they're all sort of rooting for each other. And there's not really a lot of competition going on. So for me to be seen as someone who also supports that end goal, like, I think it's easier for people to sort of connect in that way, and really trust me with telling their stories. Because a lot of the times, people have this, businesses that I work with have this idea of a story that they want to tell. And, for a lot of people, they're not comfortable speaking on camera. So I think they're really trusting me to sort of come in and tell that story in a way that, like, really feels authentic for them, really tells, like, that history, because a business story is so personal. So I think that's definitely helped me. And then in terms of transplanting to somewhere else, I don't know. I think like those values are still there. And, even the clients that I work with who aren't within the wine industry, they're still those small to medium sized businesses. They're those like, we have that sort of support local, that homegrown connection. So it's those types of businesses that I just feel passionate about working with. I have a client right now who's a physiotherapist. So definitely like different from the clients that I normally work with. And she is just amazing. And it's those same types of, principles and goals that come into play. She's a small business owner and, I'm helping to support her and build her brand. So I think like if I were to sort of transplant to another place, it would be pulling out those sort of things and figuring out how to help small businesses there grow as well.
I love that. And I think that, it still ties back into how you've managed to define out your ideal client too, right? I mean, you still take those same principles, the same core values to a new community. And I love that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sweet. Yeah. Okay. So I like to always get like super practical and, okay. So for someone business starting out that wants to build their social media, what are list a couple, maybe like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want, a couple of specific tactics that you think would be necessary for building a social media following.
Okay. Awesome. I knew this one was coming, so I made some notes because it's super important when you think about like if you don't have a social media strategy and you don't, that's not a huge part of your business, which we all know that it needs to be at this point in time, but it's hard to sort of figure out where to start. So the advice I give is always like, know your niche. Like I said before, don't try to be an expert in everything. Know sort of like what you are an expert in and what value you're going to provide. So that can be a couple of different things. So let's go to that physiotherapist I was talking about. So for the content we create for her, it is like movement tips. Obviously, she's a physiotherapist, so we're going to give movement tips to sort of, work from home tips, things like that. But then also part of her expertise is helping people to live well as well, right? So like get out and enjoy the outdoors and walking and things like that. So like movement tips, live well tips, and then like sort of inspirational things. So pulling out a few things that sort of work for you, work for your business, work for your brand. For me, yes, I do a lot of work within the wine industry. I tell a lot of wine stories. I also create content around social media marketing and storytelling because that's what I do. And then I'm a mom as well. And that's how I sort of show that lifestyle, that human side of things. So I sort of create those my little like niche content pillars, and then I figure out how to tell my story and market my business that way. So I think that would definitely be number one. And then number two is know who you're speaking to and trying to write to. So once you know that target audience you're trying to write, then you can sort of figure out how to create content that's relatable to them, that they'll read that caption and feel like you're talking directly to them, and things that sort of solve their problems, right? You want to be like the problem solver. Businesses solve a problem of some way, right? Whether it's a product or a service, you're a problem solver. You give something someone's looking for. So figure out how you can do that to the audience you're trying to speak to.
Does that include like the customer persona? Is that like that you're finding your ideal client? Is that part of knowing who you're talking to? Like solving a problem as well as finding those personas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then figuring out so number 3 would be like providing value. So how do you put content out there or market yourself on social media that's valuable to someone, right? What makes them want to keep coming back to your page? So you want to create content that's educational, that's entertaining, that's inspiring, like maybe those tips or tricks, those expert advice, like whether it's a product or a service, something that, how to use it, things that aren't just like, here's my product or service, buy it, right? Like something that really sells. So, obviously if we go back to the physiotherapist, because I've been speaking a lot about her. So yeah, she wants clients to come and book in with her and come to visit her in her clinic, but she's not just going to put that out on social to say that. Instead, we're going to create, here are 3 stretches you can do if you're spending a lot of time in front of your computer. Here are 3 tips to XYZ. Like you want to give people the value, something they can say, hey, I didn't know I needed that. That's really going to be helpful for me. I'm going to save that post. I'm going to refer back to it. But also like that was really great. Maybe I'm going to book in and go see her as well, right? Mm-hmm. So providing that value through your content. And then like such an important one, being authentic, right? You want to be yourself, be human. Like people connect with people. Like they don't care about the products or services as much as they care about that human side of things, right? So it's sometimes so hard for businesses to show that human side, the personality, the people behind the business. All of that stuff goes such a long way in creating that brand loyalty and getting people to really care about what you do. And that could be as simple as, telling your business origin story. Every business has their own unique story. That's what sets you apart from someone else. So tell that story, the history of your business, an interesting story of a person behind the business, really anything that can help people connect, because, everyone wants to feel like they have that human connection. And so a lot of the times that's, creating that video content, showing your face, jumping on Instagram stories and talking. Like a lot of the times I'll go for my like daily walk where I sort of like decompress and be like, this is my time. I've got to like get on stories and talk to my people. Like, even if it's just like, here's what I'm doing today. Hope everyone's, having a good day, whatever. Like, get out there, put yourself out there, because when people see that, that's how you form connections. And social media is all about being social and that conversation and creating those real connections. Like, I'm sure you feel the same way. You've met people on social media before you've met them in person, and you feel so connected to them, right? You're like, and then you do meet in person. You're like, I feel like I know you, right? Because that's the beauty of and the power of social media. So that authenticity, that real human life stuff is so important. And then number 5, I would definitely have to say Instagram Reels. Like that is a huge part of building a social media strategy right now and building your following. That feature on Instagram is huge. It has such huge engagement rates right now. It's such a great way to show that human side and show that authenticity that I was talking about, because a lot of the time it's like silly things or like the value, the tips and tricks, but that like quick little sound bite of content that people are really connecting with. So every one of my clients right now, we are creating Reels, and before it used to be creating like maybe a 2-minute video story, something you'd sort of see on the news, like how I would tell a story as a journalist. That would be sort of what we wanted to do, tell that lengthy story. And there's still a time and a place for that. But Instagram Reels right now, it's that we have so much content right at our fingertips that feature right now, that tool is just something that's so huge for social strategy. And I'm seeing like huge gains for all of my clients on their social channels just by using that. So that's like, if you're not on Reels, get on Reels.
And your clients are on camera more, right? Like, so how did you convince them to do that? Like, I know people have been despite being out there, I'm still hesitant to do that. And I've been on camera, it's still something that like trips me up. Like, how did you get your clients to did you just show them the numbers? Because we know Reels is like kicking butt, but like, what was your tactic to get them to move over and, show their face?
Yeah, a lot of the times I think it's like just making people feel comfortable. And I think because we don't sort of come in and say like, here's a script, read it on camera, sound natural. Right. Like no one's going to be like that. I worked as a journalist for 15 years and it took a long time to really have that like natural storytelling, like just speaking to a camera, right? There's like, it's a weird thing. So a lot of the times I think that's where that journalism background comes in really handy, because I can say like, I'm just going to put this camera here on the tripod. I'm going to chat with you, like just have a conversation with me. I'm standing here right beside it, just chat with me. And then I'll ask questions and really like make them feel like we're just having a conversation. And 9 times out of 10, you've got several great sound bites out of that, right? So just making people feel comfortable. And then I have had clients that don't feel comfortable speaking on camera, but the beauty with Reels is you don't always have to be speaking, right? So you can sort of like, my physiotherapist client, she demonstrated some stretches and she didn't ever have to speak, but with the music and the text on the screen, she's showing the stretches, like simple way. We see her on camera, it's relatable, but she doesn't have to sort of say any sort of lines. She's just doing the stretches, doing what comes natural to her. So finding ways that make that client feel like, okay, this is what I do in my sort of everyday business, and how do we leverage that?
Well, and even how you've pulled for our Reels that you're helping build. I mean, you've pulled out a lot of our previous content from our speakers and different things. So we haven't had to really do anything other than give you access to our files.
Yeah.
And, and I think that's, that can be really easy. I mean, obviously we have a history and we have a bunch of content, so that makes it really easy. But there's so many different ways that you can use Reels. And I think a lot of it is just spending time kind of flipping through as well and finding, oh, that looks really fun. Oh, that's hilarious. And seeing what people are doing. And you don't always have to reinvent the wheel to do it, right? I mean, you want to be creative and you want to stand out from those things, but at least you get some ideas that way. And I think that's a fun opportunity.
Yeah, like doing that research, right? And it's so, even when I take on a new client in a new sort of in a new industry that I might not be familiar with the type of content, it's like searching those hashtags and seeing what other people in that industry are doing. And that it's a great way for businesses to get on there, to sort of the people you follow, or the hashtags that are relevant to your industry, see what other people are doing, and if there's trends, see how you can sort of make that your own, because that's what Reels is all about. And then creating content from, like, I've gotten really good at creating content from really nothing, right? Like you have a little piece of something, or you use some stock video. Like if you have a content idea, then you can repurpose that into a reel, even if you haven't shot anything new. And the pandemic has made it really hard to shoot new content with some businesses and some things, right? So a lot of it is, okay, we have this really great content, or we have this old piece of content, or this really great idea. Like, how can we make it fresh and new? And that's, it's all about sort of being creative and putting that little like thinking cap on to figure out how you can make it work. And there's so many possibilities now. I think that's why I love Reels so much.
That's so cool. I love what you're saying about how Reels has got like really high engagement rates right now. And I think, last year we saw the same thing for LinkedIn, and every social media has a bit of a time period when they have higher levels of engagement. But within the social media world, in terms of all of the different platforms, what are some, I guess, key ways or simple ways that people can kind of utilize social media to build actual engagement with their clientele, and not just gaining extra followers, but to actually kind of go deep with their people?
I think like one of the things that I was saying before was making sure you're using like you and like you're speaking directly to your audience, right? That's huge for engagement, because a lot of the times people, and we've all seen it when we're scrolling through, it's like, hey guys, hey everyone, hey whatever, right? Hi friends, like even that, like, okay, friends, a little bit more personal. But as soon as you shift it and try to say you or your within your first like sentence, like that sparks something in the person listening to be like, oh, okay, like they're talking to me. Like, yeah, you're not really talking to you, like, but it feels like that, right? Instead of the me, the my, the whatever, like you and your, like, definitely try to implement those. And I think like that goes a long way in creating that conversation. And then in terms of we have all these engagement tools on Instagram, like the questions, the polls, the surveys. Like Instagram has given us all of these engagement tools to work with. So like, let's work with them, right? So ask questions to your audience, like even within your captions. I always try to write it with a hook at the beginning, provide my value, and then ask a question at the end, because I want people to respond. I want to create that engagement. And the more people who respond, the more engagement that post gets, the more people who see it, right? So social media is really all about like figuring out, that great piece of content and how you're going to sort of get it out there, but then how are you going to engage people with it? And like, sometimes if I post a wine recommendation and I have someone that I know is pretty active within my community like it, I might jump right into my comments and say like, what are you going to be drinking this weekend? Or what have you tried recently? Like, ask questions to your audience. And then that's like such a great way to sort of get that conversation built. And then even finding ways to communicate or ways to collaborate with other businesses who are sort of like within your niche or make sense to partner with them for something. Because then you're like cross promoting your audience with theirs. And we saw a lot of that, I think, last year. Like, okay, remember before the pandemic hit, no one was doing Instagram lives. Like that had sort of like died down a little bit, right? We weren't really doing a lot of Instagram lives. Pandemic hit, people were doing lives, like whether it was live, workouts or chats, or like musicians were doing live sort of concert things. And we just saw a lot more of that. And then, you could see sort of like the lives where you would do a live with someone else. And so both of your audiences on your Instagram accounts would be notified. So, you're bringing their audience over to yours, which is great. And then within the last couple of months, Instagram has added the ability to do like a live room almost with four different accounts going live at the same time. And I think like that's definitely a tactic to build engagement. Like if you have something, a really great conversation that you can have, then that's a great way, because then you're just reaching that other audience as well. So, and it's scary. I think it's pretty scary for people to do lives because, anything can really happen. So It makes it also a little bit easier to be like, okay, I'm going to team up with someone and I'm going to do this live. And it's not just me like chatting to, no one. I'm going to be like chatting to someone else on there. So that's huge. And then, like I said about getting on stories, right? Like Instagram stories, like, and just like chatting with your audience that way. That's huge for engagement. And then like, I know I focus a lot on Instagram because I think that's like been such a huge platform for businesses, especially within the last year with the addition of like business features like the Instagram shopping feature and things like that. But same thing with other platforms like LinkedIn, hugely beneficial. If that's where your audience is, then use those same sort of tactics, collaborate with someone on a video or on a written piece. We see a lot more video content on LinkedIn recently, and I think that plays really well on there, has a lot of engagement. Ask questions of your network. I think the great thing about LinkedIn is when people, either like or comment or share, like that shows up on their feed as well. So it's like a great way to get your content, your posts shown on other areas. So just find a way to sort of build out bigger than your one little single post.
That's awesome. I really like stories too. Instagram has so much in it. They've really just like kept on laying the features on. And I've seen like there's been a lot more lives last year. And of course, LinkedIn has really kind of like come up to the forefront of like social media. I think because everyone's just thinking about that side hustle and how to connect in a professional standpoint, but we can't get out there. So like LinkedIn has just been the spot. What is there any platform where you think for a certain business or for a certain demographic or persona, you're thinking maybe this is where someone should be? I know that we've talked about Instagram and we touched on LinkedIn, but there are the others. How do you prioritize what platform to use? I mean, some Facebook is still real. Those that are on Facebook are deep in it, so like, how do you prioritize that, right?
Yeah. I think like you definitely have to think, where do you think your audience is going to be? And there'll be people who are part of your, target market that prefer different platforms, depending on their generation or sort of where they like to spend their time. I think a lot of if you're looking for a couple of platforms to do, I think Instagram is obviously great for businesses because of all of the features. But everything I do on Instagram, I share on Facebook because it's, the same platform, essentially. It's easy to cross promote. So I always do that. I think what you said is totally true about Facebook. Like people sort of it serves a purpose for a lot of things. And I think Facebook groups are big, right? Like people are part of Facebook groups, Facebook communities, especially business ones. And that's such a great opportunity to start conversations, ask questions, see what people are interested in. So I think that's huge.
Like the Haste and Hustle business group? Yeah. Pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great resource too, like especially for someone like me who's creating content. And if I'm looking to create content that really speaks to my audience, who are businesses or entrepreneurs, people who want to know how to create content and tips, going onto some of those groups and seeing what people are asking in the questions, like that's a wealth of content ideas right there. So going on there and saying, okay, this is what people want to know more about. I'm going to focus on creating some content around that. I think Twitter is a little bit harder because I used to use it a lot when I worked in news because it's more of that like information source. I use it for one of my clients when it comes to government relations type piece, but not like doesn't have that same level of community engagement, I think, on Twitter. And I think a lot of people shy away from the like trolling aspect of it as well sometimes. And just like I love Instagram Reels, I also love TikTok. I feel like you find people who either are like, they're all in on TikTok or they're all in on Reels, but it's kind of hard to like do both. I try to repurpose some content on both, but my audience is definitely on Instagram. So I focus more on those Reels. I think it's the one thing that's a little bit more difficult for businesses on TikTok is if your product or service is really specific to an area, because it's harder to sort of pinpoint where the audience is that's seeing that content. Like I will run the analytics on some of my posts, and there are people. Some posts will have majority of the audience is from the United States. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not going to help me if I'm trying to sell a bottle of Niagara wine because it's not available there, right? So, but if you're selling a product that's available, that's widely available, like you see a lot of beauty brands doing amazingly well on TikTok, because their products are available, North America wide, if that's sort of where they're targeting, and easily accessible, especially if they're like that drugstore type product. So it just depends like where you think your audience is going to be, and then focus your efforts there. I definitely think that trying to do it all is so overwhelming. Like I choose my few and I do them. Like I think if you tried to be totally present and have a super amazing strategy on every single platform, you're totally going to burn yourself out. But there's definitely such a great way to repurpose one content idea to make it work on a couple of different platforms. Like even if you have this really great blog post, being able to, create that into a little bit of a video, or, create a Instagram carousel or an Instagram reel, or, share it on LinkedIn. Like there's ways to repurpose that idea. And I do a lot of that because those content ideas are gold, right? Like you got to maximize where they're going to be seen and the reach that they're going to have.
Exactly. I know we definitely try to pull together all of our things as well. And it's so interesting to see how you can break it up. I remember actually sitting in Gary Vaynerchuk's office one time, and we were doing this interview about failure. And all of a sudden he was like calling in all these people saying, okay, I want this on Instagram and I want this on, and he was like listing off all the places he wanted it cut and, quote this and do that. And I was like, wow, this one little interview. And I've seen it everywhere. I'm like, yeah, to this day. And that was like 3 years ago.
I just edited that for him.
Oh, did you? Oh, right. That's right.
Like
yeah.
3 clips, and I probably could have pulled more, but 3 clips for Instagram Reels, like
I
amazing,
know.
right?
So from like one little interview. And I think, we really have to kind of go back and look at some of that stuff and find, realize that there is gold in it. And I think that that's really interesting. So very, very cool.
Yeah, like I'll take some of my wine content that I created, so I'll go back a year ago, and if there was something when I check my analytics that did really well and my audience really connected with, and then I'll figure out ways to repurpose that now into a reel, or even some of the great, I archive everything that I do within the wine industry, and some of the great stuff that I've created with different winemakers or grape growers or producers from a year or 2 years ago, I'm now pulling clips from and repurposing for one of my wine clients, the Grape Growers of Ontario, who sort of are it works for them, right? I found a way to make that content work for this client, and especially in a time where it's hard to get out and shoot fresh content. So yeah, it's amazing what you can do with that. The content possibilities are endless.
Well, I hate to switch it to something negative, but this is really negative because I think that's such great advice. But I mean, there are times when campaigns or content pieces just don't work, and you can sort of see the engagement's not happening, and there's no follows and people aren't interested in it. And if it's part of a larger campaign, I mean, a lot of work goes into the back end of creating that stuff. So it's hard to kind of let it go. Do you have a process that you kind of use to decide, okay, this is not working, we're going to scrap it all? Or do you try to create it into something different? How do you make that decision when a piece of content isn't performing?
Good question, Shauna.
Yeah, I think that that there's nothing worse than spending all this time coming up with this idea, fleshing it out, maybe shooting a bunch of content and then realizing it's not really hitting the mark. A lot of the times it's analyzing those insights, and I will go through and sort of see what type of content is doing well. And if there's something that really worked, how do I make that more like this, right? Could still be the same content or the same idea, but how do I make that into something more of that my audience feels connected with? So, too much because it's a current client, but I have a client who created before me created an IGTV series, and those series, it did okay, but it didn't do great. But there was a lot of effort into going out, shooting the content, doing those interviews, editing it, creating something of it, right? And I've been able to pull that old content now and repurpose it into Instagram Reels, and seeing huge success, right? So I think the idea is probably not bad. It's just the vehicle you've chosen to sort of reach your people with, right? So it's trying to figure out how to repurpose. And also asking your audience. You know, a lot of the times I'll jump on there and put up a story slide or speak on Instagram stories and just ask my audience what they want to see more of, right? Like ask your audience what they want more of. And especially if you're struggling with how to reach them, or if something didn't do well, then definitely ask them that. And then it's also really hard to not feel discouraged when something doesn't do so well, even in something like an Instagram reel, where you can post, say you post a reel like 3 days a week, and for like 2 weeks, all of your reels are getting like thousands of views, everything's great. Then you post one that's like no different than any of the others, but the views are like half the amount, right? It's like, it's hard to not be totally bummed out that that piece of content didn't do as well. But sometimes it could just be like something as simple as like the algorithm, or like something was up that day. Like they're just coming out with insights for Instagram Reels, which is really exciting. Up until this point, it's kind of hard to analyze all of that. But yeah, it's hard to not feel discouraged, but there is sort of like this natural ebb and flow with it. And sometimes when I see that happening, but I know that that's a great piece of content, and obviously that feature works for the audience because we've seen such good engagement, I might go back and revisit that. Maybe I might choose a different song to put on it, different hashtags, or like a different message, different caption, and then repurpose it like a month later. And sometimes you see like completely opposite results. So it's really just like playing around with it to see what works and what doesn't.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've definitely seen pieces of content do well in different platforms or in different iterations of that platform. So I think that's good advice. Yeah, I know it can be a little soul crushing when you see something not work. We actually ran a campaign a few years ago and it just flopped. And you know, we did the analysis and we realized, you know, some of the errors that were made or the assumptions that we had and different things. But it was like, you know, we'd gone out and recorded it and it was fun. Like we had it was a fun campaign, but yeah, it didn't resonate. And so I think it's important to really just also, if something really isn't working on any iteration, to just really sit back and look at why and try to figure out those reasons. So yeah.
I always get so like blown away when I'll spend all this time coming up with like this great Instagram reel with all these tips, and I'll like edit it really cool and I'll think it looks so great, and I've spent like, you know, an hour or two on it, and then I put that out and it's like, oh, okay, it's got the, you know, the views are okay. But then I jump on there and do something like completely ridiculous, like, you know, sort of like I like finding audio from different things and then like, you know, lip singing it, not singing, but whatever, to make it like to then like sort of make it work for my brand, my messaging. And then those like ridiculous things do so well. I'm like, oh, I spent so much time on this other thing. And it's just this silly thing that people are like, yes, I love that. So
I know.
Yeah,
So,
sometimes like you can't overthink it, right?
yeah, for sure.
That sounds like good, like overarching social media content creation messages for the small business owner. Like, don't overthink it. Like, show your personality, get it out there.
Yourself. Yeah.
Have a little bit of fun with it too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are rounding out this hour, and I'm so grateful for your time. So I guess, you know, we'll just ask you one last question, and then if you want to share with our audience where they can reach you and how they can find you, we want people to follow you because your socials are awesome, obviously. So, but my last question is, if you could share one piece of advice, you know, overarching advice as an entrepreneur to up and coming entrepreneurs, what would that be?
That would be don't overthink it, because as entrepreneurs or people like sort of trying to think about that leap to start your own business, like it's so easy to psych yourself out, whether it's like a business decision or a new project or whatever. Like, don't overthink it and like trust your instincts. I've always operated with trusting my instincts, and they've never led me astray yet. But I think we can really like psych ourselves out and not take those big risks because we think too much or worry too much about what other people think.
Totally.
And build your network. Like I 100% don't think I'd be where I am without such a strong network of other like-minded business people who've been able to help me and encourage me along the way. Because sometimes being an entrepreneur can be like really lonely. I came from a newsroom environment where I was constantly bouncing ideas off other people and collaborating, and you don't always have that as an entrepreneur. So if you have a strong network that you can do that off of, and because sometimes like the highs are amazing, but the lows really suck. So if you have someone to sort of cheer you on those amazing times and sort of give you that advice and pick you up on those not so amazing times, then like that's huge. So network and take those risks. Don't overthink.
Awesome.
All right. Well, where can people find you online?
Okay, so at Britt Dixon Media, BRITTDIXON Media. Definitely Instagram. That's where I'm most active. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on TikTok. Like I'm on everywhere, but definitely Instagram, and then brittdixon.ca for my website. If you want to learn more about my business and content creation, some tips and all that stuff, that's on there as well.
Amazing. Well, we will link all of that in the show notes. And so, thank you everyone for joining us here on the Startup Gambit. We are actively working to support entrepreneurs all around North America and the world. And thank you, Britt, for joining us. And Devon, always, it's great having you.
Thank you. You guys are amazing.
Thanks, Britt.
Awesome.